And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I am Michael DeLon. Today I am talking with Kevin Thompson. Hey, Kevin, thank you, sir, for being with me today.
Michael, it is my honor and my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
It is going to be a great conversation. So, Kevin and I, you met here, he and I met, well, I don't know, five years
Yeah,
ago? I don't know.
2019 is when it
Yeah,
was. So
that's
it's been a little
crazy.
while.
Yeah, that was. You're one of my pre-COVID people. That's amazing. So we met at a mastermind group. We were both attending for that time, and just kind of struck it up. We've talked back and forth, and Kevin does something very unique, I think, and that's why I wanted to have him here. We're going to be talking about creating $1 million relationships. And it's going to be a fun conversation, so stick around. Kevin, as we dive into this whole conversation, just tell me and our audience, how in the world did you get doing what you are doing today?
I'll tell you, it it goes back a little ways for sure.
Uh-huh.
So I used to own a cleaning and restoration company, a carpet cleaning and water damage restoration company.
Okay.
And the guy who helped me grow that business way back when was Joe Polish.
Okay.
And Joe used to have a company called Piranha Marketing where he helped carpet cleaning companies and restoration companies better market themselves and all of that.
Okay.
And God knows when I first got in there, but man, I needed all the help I could get, man, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
Uh, but with his help, we completely transformed that company into a by referral only company. One of the other things we did is we added a website component to it, and we did that in 2000. And by 2003, I had one of the ugliest websites on the internet called getmoldsolutions.com. But by 2003, we had built a subscriber list of about 18,000 people from across the country and around the world. And that website was producing between $15,000 and $20,000 a month for the company.
Hmm.
And in the spring of '03, Joe calls me and he's like, "Hey, would you be willing to?" He used to host this big annual event for the cleaning and restoration
Okay.
industry every year. He's like, "Would you be open to coming down to the annual event this year and showing everybody what you're doing with your website?" And I'm like, "You mean you want me to speak on stage?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "All right." And I've never done that before, Michael.
Okay.
And but he also told me, he's like, "Before you come, be sure to document everything you do, what you do, how you do it, put it into a course, because there is going to be a certain percentage of the folks that once they hear from you, they're going to want your help, and just make sure you're ready to offer them that."
Wow.
And so I did that, and I got some help. Joe turned me on to somebody to help me kind of structure that, and we put a course together. And I went down and I spoke at his event in November of 2003, and I did about a 40-minute presentation. At the end, I just simply said, "Hey, if this resonates with you, if this makes sense, if you feel like I might be able to help you, well, here's what that would look like, and here's what the investment would be." And we sold $35,000 worth of that course that I had just created.
Wow.
And I was like, that was my response,
I
was
was gonna say
wow.
you're probably shocked.
I was like, wow, I had never experienced anything like that before. And and what I also, didn't realize, looking back, hindsight's, 2020, but I had also done my very first ever strategic partnership with
Hmm.
Joe. And he had an audience of people, and I had something that he felt would be valuable for those people. And so by bringing us together, we made it 35,000 in sales. And the thing is, though, that Joe and I, not once did we ever have a conversation around, if we do this, Kev, we're going to make all this money. The
Hmm.
conversation was around, Joe was like, "Kevin," he's like, "these people are going to love you for sharing this. And they're going to love me for having you come and speak and share with them." And he's like, "You are going to help me further the relationship that I already have with all of my folks and stuff." And I can tell you that if he would have thought for 1 second that I would have damaged the relationship he had with all the folks, he would have never put me there.
Right.
And I learned from that. The following year, the following spring, April 19th of '04, we sold the cleaning and restoration business. I went into the publishing business full time. And over the course of the next 12 years, we sold $16.1 million worth of that course that I had created.
Wow.
And we did it all through strategic partnerships. I partnered with other, in fact, you and I met at Mike Crow's event. Well, Mike
Yes.
and I had done an event together. We did it back then, we were doing teleseminars. There was no such thing as Zoom or video
Yeah.
conferencing back then. It was get a bunch of people on a telephone line, and I would just stand there or sit there with the phone to
Mhm.
my ear, giving a presentation,
Yep. I remember
And
the days.
but Mike and I did a project together, and it was very successful as well. And over the course of that 12 years, I did almost 500 strategic partnerships. I really came to understand the value of right relationships
Mm,
and the importance of taking care of those people and honoring those relationships,
right.
because without those relationships, my business would not have grown the way that it did. And looking back, I also realized that that whole time I was laying the groundwork and the foundation for the work that I get to do today. That
Hmm.
today I get to be this guy who facilitates relationships and facilitates strategic partnerships that impact millions of people's lives.
Yeah.
And the natural organic byproduct of that is millions of dollars in revenue get created.
Right.
And it is an incredibly rewarding. I mean, I love doing the work that I get to do these days.
That is so cool. What a great background. And I didn't know the Joe Polish part of your story. That was really interesting. I like that because the 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 underlying word, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but as you think about your $1 million relationships and right relationships and all of that, the underlying word that struck me, Kevin, was trust.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
And today, trust is at an all-time low
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
marketplace.
Yes.
And when you have the trust of a partner, a strategic partner, and they tell their audience, "Hey, this is Kevin. If you
Mhm.
need something like this and Kevin does this, you should work with Kevin because I know Kevin, and Kevin's an upright right." That carries the day. Fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is such a huge piece of the work. So, because people reach out to me all the time, people I don't even know, that they've
Hmm.
heard about me through social media, through whoever, and they'll reach out and ask if I can connect them with so and so. And the challenge is that I don't know that person.
Right.
And the person that they're wanting to get connected with, maybe I know them, maybe I don't. But if I do know them, and I have a great relationship with that person. It goes all the way back to that very first experience with Joe Polish, all the way back in 2003. My gosh, now we're talking 22
20.
years ago.
Yes.
And and so when my I have to show up the same way
Right.
for the people in my world, because anybody that I bring into their life, I have to feel 100% that this person is going to help me further the relationship I already have with that person.
Right.
And if for any reason I feel it's not that way, I can never make that introduction,
Right.
because we do, and like after 22 years of doing this, I have earned this space of being this trusted connector for a lot of people in my life now.
Yeah.
But trust and relationships are everything. And so to just, be able to just out of the blue make connections for people, you can't do that. You
Yeah.
can't do that because it's all about trust and relationships first. But I'll tell you, you focus on that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the kind and caliber of relationships that I can facilitate, because it's partly what I do, is partly my God-given gifts and abilities, but the other part of it is who I'm serving, who they
Mm,
are and how they
yeah.
show up, and what assets they bring to the table. And when they're the right person, I will tell you, the opportunities can get really big.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because they know people, right? But it's this, you have this, you've cultivated over time, and I'm dating myself now, a Rolodex per se of high trust, full integrity relationships.
Yeah.
And I work with a lot of financial advisors, right? And so the word these days in the financial advisory world is fiduciary. Are you a
Okay.
fiduciary, right? And they've got courses and things and all kinds of certifications. And I was talking to one this week, and he's like, "Well, I got to go take that course to be a fiduciary and get that." I'm like, "Well, okay, take the course, but at the end of the day, you should always be a fiduciary because Jesus said, 'Do to others what you'd have them do to you.'" Let's use that as the standard. Unfortunately, most people don't, right? But you at one level are a relationship fiduciary because you're putting the needs of those people in front of whatever needs you may have.
Yeah.
And you're not going to make that recommendation if anything in your world or your gut would tell you something's not right here
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because your name's
100.
on the line
Yes.
as well as your
Yes.
partners.
Yes. And when we're talking about, these kind of entrepreneurs, where I mean, so just like the kind of entrepreneurs we're talking about, they're already past the stage in their business of needing to create cash flow for sustainability. They've already done that, so
Mhm.
they're running businesses anywhere from 1 million, 10 million, 20 million, on up. Um, they're not looking to network. A lot of people,
Yeah.
there's lots of networking opportunities out there.
Right.
The typical networking, these entrepreneurs, their time is too valuable for the typical networking.
Yes.
But what they do want is they want to make real, meaningful, deep relationships with the right people, who
Yeah.
the right people are like-minded entrepreneurs who align with them on values
Right.
and who are doing business at their level and above. That's who they want to connect with.
Yep.
And when you create that alignment right there, and you just kind of become known for doing that, the right people end up just reaching out to you because they just
Yeah.
tell you what they got going on. Like, man, you think you can help with this kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
And
And so many times as an entrepreneur, we need a partner. We need a strategic partner, but we're not really sure where to find them.
yes,
And
yes.
that's kind of where you sit in the middle is that if you know Kevin and you've got a great relationship with Kevin, well, Kevin knows lots of people. Is that kind of how it works?
That is totally true. Yes, they don't know exactly how to find the right partners. They also don't necessarily know how to the best way to set up a strategic
Mm,
partnership.
yeah.
And so they'll have a lot of times they'll have these awkward conversations just because they don't know what they don't know. and
Yes.
and I try to simplify things for them, and it goes all the way back to that experience with Joe Polish 22 years ago.
Hmm.
That what our job is, if when we are looking to do a strategic partnership with somebody, what it's really simple. All we're looking to do is we are want to bring our God-given gifts and abilities and resources to the table for the purpose of helping our partner further the relationship that they already have with their clients, with their prospects, with the people in their lives.
Yeah.
That's our job. And so when we're talking with them, it's not about how do we set up a strategic partnerships, it's how do we co-create and collaborate together on this. We want to get insight from them because you know what? They've been serving those clients for a long time.
Right.
They have a lot of insight about their people. We have insight too, And
Hmm.
now it's this co-creative and collaborative conversation that takes place of these minds coming together from the standpoint of how can we do something together that would be far more powerful than anything that either one of us could possibly do on our own.
Yeah, it is so good. So, all right, let me take a rabbit trail here because I think it ties in. I think it ties in. You tell me. So, Joe Polish, right? I've watched him for many years. I was in strategic coach last year with Dan Sullivan, and Dan and Joe have that kind of relationship. You know,
Yes, they
Dan,
do.
Joe's in strategic coach and has been there for decades. Dan is in Joe's programs, been there forever, and they facilitate stuff. And Dan tells a story when he just wrote his last book, 10x is better than 2x, or whatever it is. He was at a Joe Polish event, and he needed somebody, and well, right there's Ben Hardy. And then they got together, and the way Dan tells it is, it was like, I know who you are, and I need your help because they were there. And then they
Yeah.
needed a publisher, and well, the publisher's right over here, and it was that the cool thing I love about that is I've heard Dan and Joe both talk about saying Joe is the highest referring people into Strategic Coach,
Yes.
and Dan's the highest referring guy into Genius Network, and they'll
Yes.
both tell you this, but we don't get money from each other. That's not
No.
what it's about.
No.
And
No.
when I heard that, watched that, I thought that's really what we're talking about. The challenge is, Kevin, I don't know Joe Polish. I don't know Dan. I don't know other entrepreneurs, but you do. And I think you're the conduit to help entrepreneurs develop that kind of a strategic partnership with other entrepreneurs
Yes.
when people get to know you. Is that a fair
Yes.
summary? That was a long story, but
No, I mean, and that is such a brilliant example of such a powerful strategic partnership. And so, Joe used to be, like I said, he used to own Piranha Marketing. He was where he served the carpet cleaning and restoration industry.
mm-hmm.
And then in 2007, he launched Genius Network. So now he's running Piranha Marketing and Genius Network side by side. They're two completely different audiences for both businesses.
Yeah,
And Genius Network really started taking off over the next several years. And it took off so much that Joe, he was trying to run both Piranha Marketing and Genius Network, but coming to the realization that I can't effectively do both.
right.
And that where he really wanted to focus on was Genius Network and growing Genius Network. That's how he was going to make his biggest impact. But his big concern was, what do I do with all these cleaning and restoration companies? Well, the solution ended up being Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach. So when Joe made the decision to, okay, I am going to focus my 100% effort on Genius Network, and I'm going to stop serving the cleaning and restoration industries through
Mm-hmm.
Piranha Marketing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to let them all know, because most of them already knew about Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach, because Dan had spoken at a lot of Joe's events for that industry. So a lot of people already knew of Dan Sullivan and stuff.
Right.
And so Joe referred everybody over to Strategic Coach. And just like that, Strategic Coach had a whole bunch of new members that were just because Joe had some very successful members in his
Yes.
group and stuff. And so that kind of started this whole relationship with Dan and Joe. And like, yeah, they don't keep track, they don't send money to each other or anything like
Right.
that. They just refer business to each other. And
Yeah.
they have systems in place so that it just happens all the time,
It does. Yeah.
and
Well, it's a mindset, because I remember
yeah,
when I hearing Dan Sullivan tell the story of the book. Um, I think it may have been Who Not How. It's one of those that he did with Ben Hardy,
yeah,
and Dan said we didn't even have a discussion. He's like, here's the discussion we had on royalties and payment. He's like, Ben, you get everything, and everybody's like, what? And Dan's like, I don't want any money. I'll get enough clients in Strategic Coach from the book. That's where I'm going to make my money. I want Ben to make all the money, all the royalties. Brother, that is a strategic partnership with a guy who understands the value of relationships. And that's what
yes,
you help people do, right?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
it's a totally different mindset than I mean, and I was schooled in Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham, and they had joint venture strategic partnerships where there is a revenue share, and there's nothing wrong with those, right? But this
No,
is a different level. This is a different structure. This is a different level of trust to go. You could have totally open, honest conversations. Say, here's what I got. Here's what I want to do. How do we partner together? How do we help? How do we
yeah,
build something, as Covey would say, a third alternative that it doesn't exist unless the two of us come together, right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
exactly.
so how talk a little bit about how, I mean, your Rolodex is pretty massive. You've been doing this quite a long time. And how do you, Kevin, begin relationships with entrepreneurs who might be listening to this going, this is really intriguing? Do they reach out to you? Do you have a mastermind group? How do you cultivate relationships to continue building out that network of yours
Yeah.
so that you always know where the connections could potentially be made? How do you
Well,
do that?
over the last 20 years, I've been in part of a lot of different groups.
Mm-hmm.
Genius Network, we were in that for over 10 years. I mean, in fact, I have invested well over $1 million being part of groups and being joining entrepreneurial events and all of that kind of stuff. And now, though, it kind of happened completely organically, and you can probably relate to this too. Is I started the $1 Million Relationships podcast 3 years ago. It's actually April will be 3 years.
Okay.
And now pretty much everybody in my life comes through that doorway. And for me, it's just been a perfect way to start new relationships because it's in such alignment. I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love talking with entrepreneurs specifically about their most valuable relationships.
Yeah.
And so now, I will tell you, Michael, that podcast, we just released, I think, our 280th some episode. Uh, that podcast now puts me in touch with entrepreneurs that I would never have had a reason to connect with if not for hosting the podcast.
Yeah.
And now because entrepreneurs, so I'll give you a perfect example of this. I interviewed this guy Jeremiah for the podcast last month. And he had such a great experience with it. And he's like, man, Kevin, he's like, this was awesome. He's like, my buddy Jim is wanting to get on podcasts. And he would love your podcast. And so if it's all right with you, I'm going to tell him about your podcast. And then if he is interested, I know he is, but I'm just going to confirm, I'll get you guys connected. And so he sent an email and connected us. And Jim replied before I mean, like within 40 minutes, Jim already replied and was like, yeah, Kev, I'm so excited to meet you. I already talked with Jeremiah about his experience. And man, I love the idea of coming on your podcast. And I already know who I'm going to talk about. It's going to be the guys in the band. And he's like, Kev, we've been together for years, and through all the highs and lows, we're still together and still best friends. And man, I just love those guys so much. But he didn't say the band. And
Okay.
and I had to look him up. His last name is Sonfeld. And when I Googled him, I come to find out that he is the drummer for Hootie and the Blowfish.
Oh, no way.
And I was like, wow. And so him and we had a conversation, kind of like a pre-interview conversation, just get to know each other a little bit. We made such a connection. I found out what he's working on and what he's wanting to do, and it turned out I was in a position to help him out and stuff.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, I give you that example, but I could give you example after example after example like that. That, for me, the $1 Million Relationships podcast has been such an amazing tool, if you will, for just starting new relationships because it's a way for me to give.
Yep.
It's a way for me to give somebody else kind of like just let them experience what it's like being in my world a little bit.
Exactly.
And it's just really such a great way to start a relationship that now we just kind of have a conversation of finding out how we might if be able to do anything together or help each other out or whatever that might look like and
Yeah.
stuff. And so now that is my pretty much my soul. So if anybody wants to connect me, I say, hey, suggest to them that we do an interview for the podcast. That's what I do,
That's awesome.
and
Yeah.
that's how we'll start off the relationship.
How simple is that? That's brilliant, by the way. And I hope my audience is listening to that, because the way that a podcast should work is just like that. It's a conversation.
Yes.
And you spend 20, 30, 40 minutes together asking questions, and at the end of that time you've bonded at some level.
Yeah.
And that just really opens the gateway to go, wow, what else could we do? We don't
Yeah.
know. Let's
Yeah.
talk. Let's keep that conversation going. And it just spawns other opportunities, other thought processes. But the simplicity of being able to market that way, dare I say, attract clients that way, is they're attracted to you, Kevin, because you're a giver.
Yeah.
You give somebody a platform, you say, come on here, and I want to talk about you and the relationships that impacted you.
That's
Who
right.
do you want to honor? And that's
Yeah.
a lost art in our day and age, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And so listening to your podcast is amazing. Being on it is going to help other business owners as well. But I think even more than that, really, Kevin, is them getting to know you, because you were like this when I met you back in 2019. You're just Kevin.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I love about you. There's no pretense. There's no show. It's Kevin.
Yeah.
And that's how that's how we need to be: authentic and genuine.
Yeah.
And
Well, and you mentioned the word giver, and quite candidly, Michael, anybody that I'm going to serve, or anybody that's going to be a client of mine in any shape whatsoever, they absolutely have to be a giver.
yes.
Because the givers and takers, and I've been in like tons of mastermind groups, tons of events over the years, and you know what, you go to this stuff, and there's givers and takers. There's always givers and takers.
That's right.
But I can only have givers in my inner circle, because they have to be able to show up that way in order for me to be able to do my thing. If I let takers into my world, it would be catastrophic. And it has happened on occasion. Once in a while, somebody portrays themselves a certain way, and I let them in, and I find out later that, oh, they're not that way, and I have to show them the door.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't happen very often, but yeah, that is a huge, huge thing right there. They have to be a giver.
You have to be a giver. And I mean, it goes all the way back to, wow, my BNI days, right? Giver's gain is their philosophy. But when you I don't even want to say when you adopt that philosophy, when that philosophy is within you,
yeah,
you are a giver. And whether it's in business or life, you're here to serve others. And I think, for me, it comes all the way back to looking at Jesus. He's like, I did not come to be served, but to serve.
yes.
And I look at that model and I go, okay, if it's good enough for him, I think it should be good enough for me. And the reality of it is, the more you give, the more you hold others up, give them the platform, put the spotlight on them, the more it comes back around to you. Sometimes from a very circuitous route, but it comes back.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you're Kevin, when you go somewhere, whether it's a mastermind group, whether it's to your kid's school or wherever you're going, you realize that your reputation gets there before you do. And I think people have forgotten that. And one thing I appreciate about you, Kevin, is you've got a great reputation, but you run in a circle of people with great reputations, and you guard those reputations and protect those reputations, because it's valuable for everybody. It's not about the money. It's about the trust, the integrity, and that when Kevin recommends somebody to you, it's gold. You don't have to worry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah,
so
and
good.
money and revenue is just the natural and organic byproduct,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, we focus so much on revenue, driving revenue, that we forget about relationships.
Yeah.
And if you look in the dictionary, I'm pretty sure relationship comes before revenue. And I think it should happen in life as well. And you're a master at it. So all right, $1 Million Relationships podcast, is that the Is it a .com? What if somebody's out
Yeah,
there going,
you can check out the podcast on Apple or other
okay,
platforms, but yeah, Apple podcast is a great place to check it out. If what you see there resonates with you, and if you are kind of an entrepreneur like we've been talking about, and you're a giver and all of that, and that podcast speaks to you, by all means, reach out. I would absolutely love to have a conversation, get to know you a little bit, and just explore the possibility of doing an interview with you for the podcast and stuff. I'd love to do that. I'm really easy to get to. I have a website, maximum-response.com. Or I'm Kevin the Connector on Facebook. I'm pretty actively engaged on Facebook. You can hit me up there and send me a message there and stuff. And yeah, if you are an entrepreneur who is just doing some great things in this world, who is making a big impact, that is your focus, is you want to use your business to make your biggest impact possible. um, you're my kind of people, man.
mm,
And regardless of whether we do anything together, like I said, at a minimum, man, we might as well at least have a conversation, get to know each other, and I get you some PR. We could do a podcast interview together, you know.
right.
and
That's right.
so,
Yeah.
and
And you'll have a
so,
whole lot of fun in the process, you know.
yeah, for
It-
sure, for
um,
sure.
all
And
right. Well, I'm gonna grab all that. I'll have that in the show notes because you and I, Kevin, we could go on for hours
oh
about the
yeah,
importance of cultivating these $1 million relationships. And it's interesting. What hits me, Kevin, is for for me, if I wanted to begin a $1 million relationship with somebody, it's going to take time. I need
yeah,
to be purposeful, right? And one relationship is great, but what if I wanted five of those? Well, that's going to take an awful lot of effort on my part and intentionality, and it can be done. Or if I'm the right kind of person, I can connect with Kevin, be on his podcast, get to know him because Kevin has all the relationships. And so many times, kind of like your Hootie and the Blowfish dude, he got on there and through a conversation, you were able to go, I know somebody. I can connect the dots for you, very much like a Joe Polish Dan Solomon, and pave the way.
yeah,
Save so much time, effort, money, stress, energy, because it's a natural progression. And
yeah,
so you're like it's like in Star Wars. There's that one scene when I think it's Han Solo's flying one of the ships, and he's like, "Push the button to go to hyperspeed," right?
yeah, yeah.
I think you're the hyperspeed guy for authentic, genuine relationships that make sense, and you protect them with your name.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the highest shield of protection anybody could have.
Well, here's the thing, Michael. When you get the right entrepreneurs together, that we've already got this level of trust with each other and stuff, and you can get because I do this all the time in what I call these virtual roundtables. I host them on Zoom and get 4 or 5 entrepreneurs together. They get on the Zoom call. Nobody knows each other. 2.5 hours later, they're all exchanging contact information, making plans to follow up, refer business together, figuring out how they can partner together, all of that stuff. And the thing is when they come there because they've got trust in me, and so they'll invest their time because they've got trust in me. They don't, and but that trust then will just kind of fall over to everybody else there, because they're like, well, if I'm trusting Kevin and I'm showing up here, these people obviously trust him too and stuff. And so when that trust is there, when there is trust in two things specifically, there's trust in character and there's
Mm,
trust in competence. And when those two trusts are present, all of a sudden now there's zero friction. And that's what allows for the hyperspeed that you talked about,
yeah.
because it's always lack of trust, either in character or in competence, that slows everything down or brings it to a halt altogether. But when those two trusts are present, like I said, there's zero friction, and it can be mind blowing a little bit if you have not experienced that, or maybe you have experienced it, but you couldn't articulate why it happened. Was because there was trust in character and competence.
Kevin, wow, that mic drop, that is amazing. That the way you structured that right there is so important for business owners to understand. And wow, we could do a whole nother podcast on that, because from a marketing perspective, a traditional marketing perspective, nobody talks about character. They're all hiding behind their credentials, and this is how many. Doesn't matter.
That's right.
You have to show up with your character, because one of my marketing philosophies is people buy who you are more than what you do.
Absolutely.
Who you are is character.
Yes.
And when you have great character that's rock solid, and you have competence to get the job done well with excellence, yeah, you're right. All the friction goes away and people go, how do we do this? Let's make this happen.
Amen. That's it.
Well said, man. I want everybody just to, before you reach out to Kevin, rewind and just listen to this whole conversation, especially the last 5 minutes, but re-listen to this, because there were nuggets in this that are mind-shifting nuggets. Then go check out Kevin's podcast, the $1 Million Relationship Podcast. You can find it on Apple and Spotify and probably everywhere else. Listen to that. And if you think that you're that kind of entrepreneur, reach out to Kevin and have a conversation. He's going to be the same guy that you hear right here. That's who you're going to get.
And that's who you're going to get.
You're going to begin what could potentially be $1 million relationship with Kevin Thompson. So, brother, thank you. Thank you so much for being my guest. But Kevin, thank you for being who you are, showing up, being a man of character and competence, and just living the life authentically. Thanks for doing that.
Absolutely. My honor, Michael.
Brother, take care. Thanks for being my guest. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Expert Speak. Again, re-listen to this whole episode. Reach out to Kevin and start forming your $1 million relationships. Take care. God bless.